Hello, everyone. Oh, I have no light. There we go. That's much better. Door closed. Here we go. All right. It's been a long day, a long week. My podcast recordings have continued apace, although there are not nearly so many this week, which is nice, but a lot is happening in all areas of my life over at Something Other Publishing. We are working on a new sci-fi and fantasy anthology called Fantastic Worlds, and we're in the middle of contracting, getting people on board, and that means tons and tons of emails. We are also in the middle of wrapping up our annual short story contest. It's our very last one. Sad day, but we're just wrapping up the end of that too, which is, again, a lot of emails, a lot of things happening. We have great new content at the Cameron Journal this week. Today on the journal, we published America First, Nations and Nationalism, which is my signature essay on nations and nationalism, by which I mean America First policies like what Donald Trump is proposing. We went through this whole America First thing in the 1920s, and it was not one of our finer moments. Like, we'll just put that out there. It led to a lot of isolationism, protectionism. It led to a lot of really dangerous things. That ended, it basically ended up with, kind of the result is the world around us crumbled. We had to get involved in World War II, and we all know how that kind of came out. It also gets into how America is a different sort of nation, some of the problems with globalization, and why going inward and stepping back from the planet is not, necessarily a solution. So it's great. So make sure to check that out. It's on the front page of the Cameron Journal right now at CameronJournal.com. And we had also other really great stuff coming along that I'm very proud of. I have all of my new big essays. Um, all of my new big essays from my book, What the Hell is Going On, now that I'm not reprinting anymore, um, are all coming out on the Cameron Journal. I've been scheduling some of them, and they're basically coming out um, every week, every Monday, um, for I think until March or April. So every Monday there'll be a new long form essay, and sometimes you'll have other ones in there as well because I have other material that I'm putting out. I also, and this is very exciting for those of you that are into philosophy, Dan Sanderson from Planksip is doing a new course with us called Reimagining Plato. He's also an executive contributor here at the Cameron Journal. He has a whole series of philosophy articles that'll be coming out twice a month until April. So that's really exciting as well. So we've got philosophy, we've got politics, we've got videos, we've got tons of podcast content. I'm sitting on 18 episodes right now that will all start airing in February, probably at least 2 or 3 a week, for the foreseeable. So, yeah, so I would definitely encourage you to go check, keep an eye on the Cameron Journal because we have got lots of great stuff happening. If you don't follow us on social media, you definitely should. So make sure to head over to the front page and follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever your favorite flavor is. I do an exclusive LinkedIn business letter for business owners. So if you're one of my business people, I have not done a newsletter for the new year, but don't worry, it's because I'm working on my annual trends report, which always takes me a little bit longer. But and also, even if you're waiting on that, make sure while you're at the Cameron Journal to sign up for the monthly, or not monthly, the weekly newsletter. Every Saturday, I put out a weekly wrap-up of headlines, stories I'm following, updates from the Cameron Journal. It also includes links to the recording of this show. It includes links to the interviews that week. It's kind of one-stop shopping for everything. So if you're watching, if you love this, all this sort of thing, make sure to get involved. That's how we go. That's how we grow. That's how I'm able to keep doing this. I've been doing it for a really long time, and I want to keep doing it. But it is dependent on lovely people like yourself, continuing to interact, sharing with your friends, letting people know. I have recently gotten a little bit more popular on Twitter, which I appreciate. I'm also loving the following on Blue Sky, which is really awesome. Really enjoying that platform. I'm also really enjoying all the new people that have followed me on YouTube. That is really excellent. Getting a lot more comments on different videos, things like that. Even some of the author interviews have started to really go and grow. So I think we're creating something special here, and so I just want to remind people to keep interacting, keep coming alongside. I definitely appreciate it. I do have a little bit of a backlog of content for you guys too, including my titular article on immigration is done. I have to publish it and find some place because there's so much content coming out now. It's like, how's this poor thing gonna get any air? And also, just other lots of fun stuff is coming along. Today, this will not come out for a long time, but I had a fascinating interview. With a guy who was a firefighter in New York City, and he worked at the same firehouse that fought the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. I'm tired today. In 1911, and he wrote a historical fiction book about it. Fascinating conversation. Won't come out for a long while, but it's great, and I'm really looking forward to it. So that's kind of what's happening with me around the Cameron Journal. I am a little bit tired today. I was thinking last night when I was going to bed, I could use one more day. Like, the weekend is sometimes a little bit short because I get up on Saturday, I write the newsletter, and then I have household things to do and life things to do and all this type of thing. So Sunday's kind of my only day for myself. And I was thinking, I could use one more day. But I had things to do, emails to answer, I had a podcast recording today, all this type of thing, and of course this to do. But I'm glad to be here. Thank you all for being here. So, with that having all been said, there's a lot to cover, there's a lot going on, so I want to get into headlines, and I want to start with kind of where we're at with things. So let me make sure I have the right thing here. And yeah, so a couple interesting things have happened. Let me change to the proper view here. There we go. A couple things have happened. A lot has happened, actually. And over the weekend, a company in China released an AI called DeepSeek, and it is smaller, cheaper, faster than pretty much anything on the market right now. It is as good as ChatGPT o1, but you can run it locally on your own machine. It does, people are amazed, and supposedly it only costs $5 million to build. And now, it did come from a team of about 200 people, all this sort of thing. It wasn't some small plucky team. They definitely backward engineered o1 to create their model, and they came up with a couple of innovations in memory and all this sort of thing. I saw some threads about that. And that also kind of goes along with the story, this one over here, about Trump ordering working group to draft new regulations and national stockpile of Bitcoin. And we knew this was coming because Trump announced he was a very pro-crypto person during the campaign. We knew it was coming, and it says here, action orders working group to start working on crypto regulations, orders banking services for crypto companies to be protected, orders bans creation of a U.S. central bank digital currency, and Trump had courted crypto cash during the presidential campaign. Right, all true. We knew that. I am surprised that he's banning a central government crypto, which I think is interesting. Um, and it says here, Nathan McCauley, CEO and co-founder of the crypto company Anchorage Capital, said, by taking a whole-of-government approach to crypto, the administration is making a significant first step towards writing clear, consistent rules of the road. Um, and this all led to this tweet. This is the week where decades happened. Crypto is now legal, referencing this here about Trump order a crypto working group to get ready to take crypto seriously. AI is now free. That's the DeepSeek thing. The entire Blue Empire is being shut down by executive order. And after the post-war order, we entered the post-internet order. And this stuck out to me. The person writing this thinks this is a good thing. Okay. They don't know what they're losing. So much of our lifestyle, cheap products, inexpensive electronics, all this sort of thing, is predicated entirely on globalization, secured by the U.S. Navy and an orderly liberal world order. Our ability to freely trade with other nations, our ability for other nations to freely trade with us, the fact that we are the world's reserve currency, almost all financial transactions run through the United States at somehow or other, all of that is predicated on decades of relationships, reputation building, money, everything that has made our current world possible. It has allowed the democratization of products and services at a level unseen in human history. But now, this phrase here, the entire Blue Empire is being shut down by executive order. And after the post-war order, we enter the post-internet order. I don't think they understand the gravity of what that actually means. And I think it's funny that it's being classed as the Blue Empire, as if only Democrats are responsible for this. As if we haven't had 3 Republican presidents, and more if you want to go back far enough, who have painstakingly done this, kept it up, kept it going, and made it possible. That have understood the importance of our place in the world and keeping it stable. And now the attitude is burn it all down. We just want our Bitcoin and make money on Bitcoin, and we just want our stuff, and we want to automate everything with AI and make money, and we want to build stuff, and we want to do stuff, and we're tired of people stopping us. They're destroying the world. Like, let's just put it out there. They want to burn it down. And if there's anything kind of more obvious, I feel like this is a halcyon moment. They're burning it down. Here's the problem. And the boomers did this in the 60s. You don't know what you had until it's gone. You don't know how important it was until it's no more. And I feel like this whole, it's like, I mean, yes, I suppose it's great if you're one of the people that is able to do this and has the talent and tech and whatever have you. I'm sure all of this feels like you have been being held back and society has been put upon you and all this type of thing. But honestly, this comes off as a bunch of whining. And also, here's the other problem. They're not considering anyone else. And this gets into the whole Ayn Rand thing, which is funny because I interviewed someone who talked about how much of a Randian they were, as it was a point of pride. I wrinkled my nose because I've actually read her work. Most people haven't. This is not. This is I mean, this is the whole Ayn Rand idea of if all the creative people. This is Atlas Shrugged. If all the creative people get up and leave and go to some faraway place, the world will implode. That's the philosophical attitude and they're trying to force it. They're tired of actually having to deal with living in a society that involves other people, emphasis on other people who have needs, wants, desires, dreams that may not necessarily align with their tiny, narrow, infinitesimally small way of thinking and looking at the world. That may want more than that, or just may not simply fit in with their new tiny little world. And I think it is interesting that their focus is nothing here is, oh great, we're free to build a better society, we're free to do something better. Even if you look at the comments, nothing here has anything to do with building a better society, creating something better for people, all this type of thing. It's basically own the libs as fast as possible. That's basically, basically it. No one is trying to mitigate the downstream effects of everything that is happening. No one is talking about how do we help everybody take advantage of this? How do we build that better society? No, that's not the conversation being had down here. I said it last night and scrolled through all of this. None of these people are talking about this to a person. No one cares. They just want their stuff. They want their artificial intelligence. They want their crypto. All this type of thing. They want their tech utopia. And if getting their tech utopia means crushing everyone else along the way, they're going to do it. Watch them. They're already starting. It's already here. It's already here. And people forget crypto's a Ponzi scheme. Probably why Trump likes it. It's this is not, everyone's billing this as some great golden age. Trump keeps talking about the new American golden age, all this type of thing. If you have to talk about it being a golden age, it's not a golden age. That's something historians assign to a great period of history later, usually a long time later. Any leader who's out there saying it's a new golden age it's not great. That's covering up for bad things happening. And I think it is it's quite sad. But this definitely gave me a ton of pause about what's coming, who's in charge, what they want. It's I didn't find it I did not find it happy. I did not find it joyful. I did not look forward to it. All I saw was people, a bunch of basically whiners who want their stuff. And that's really depressing. I think I expected more of us. And I shouldn't have. It was very sobering. The Blue Empire. That phrase is going to stick with me for a while. The Blue Empire. But, I mean, honestly, we should not be terribly surprised. Much of the 2024 election was about the existing status quo. And part of the problem with the existing status quo is who it advantaged and who it served and who it didn't serve. And any system that isn't good at serving people for very long tends not to last very long. That's how it goes. And when systems eventually stop serving enough of a certain segment of people or enough people in general, people want to tear down the system because humans naturally, in their brains, and Gaston Bachelard talks about this, humans naturally are very good at finding the fastest way to a goal. They want to find the fastest route to get what they want. And our brains, because we're large predators, are made to preserve as much energy while doing that. People will work within a system to a certain tipping point. When that system becomes too hard to navigate, they'll simply bypass it and go around it. Sometimes, even if the consequences are devastating, sort of thing. Oh, I won't get caught. I'll deal with that later. All this type of thing. And I see how we've reached this tipping point. But also, let's not forget that the people who were disadvantaged by a lot of the status quo were of a certain class, of a certain skin tone, of a certain background, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. And that's important to bear in mind. And I think moving forward, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot politically in this country without making sure you're keeping certain segments of the population sweet. And by certain segments, I mean mostly white people. And that gets into the white racial consciousness that I talk about in my recent essay, How to Change the Conversation About Race. There'll be another essay coming along where I talk more about that in the coming weeks. But there's a lot of that's a big factor, and I think we have to really shift our thoughts about this country, how politics works, all this type of thing, what issues matter to voters in a very different way. But then again, that's supposing we have elections any further. And I'm not totally sold on that we will. But that's another story for another day. Right now, I want to move on to this fun story. This is as we feared. So, loyalty tests and MAGA checks inside the Trump White House's intense screening of job seekers. And we knew this was coming, especially given what happened in Trump administration part 1. Says here, job seekers hoping to join the new Trump administration are facing a series of intense loyalty tests, with White House screening teams fanning out to government agencies to check for Make America Great Again bona fides and carefully parsing applicants' politics and social media posts. President Donald Trump has long said he believes the biggest mistake he made during his first term was hiring what he considered to be the wrong kinds of people. Now aides are working aggressively to ensure the government is filled only with loyalists. Negative social media posts have been enough to derail applications. Those seeking jobs have been told they will have to prove their enthusiasm to enact Trump's agenda and have been asked when their moment of MAGA revelation occurred. One federal employee said they briefly considered buying Trump's crypto meme coin in case the president's team asked about their voting record. The intense screening has led some federal workers to question whether Trump's team cares more about loyalty than competence. There's a concern that his team is ousting foreign policy and national security diplomats and others who could offer the administration expertise and institutional knowledge at a time of conflict worldwide. Trump officials have made no secret of their intention to fill the administration, with hires sharing the president's vision. They began checking potential staffers shortly after Trump launched his campaign and have continued since he won. An application form on the Trump Transition website, for instance, asks candidates what part of President Trump's campaign message is most appealing to you and why. It also asks how they supported Trump in the 2024 election, with choices including volunteering, fundraising, door knocking, making phone calls, and to submit a list of their social media handles. We are interviewing every single one of these individuals. If you're working in the federal government in a political appointee position, that comes through the White House now. The White House Personnel Director Sergio Gore said Thursday on Fox News. Trump, he said, has been very clear of who he doesn't want to include in this administration, and so those are clear guidelines that we adhere to, and we bring the best people possible into the White House and into every department across this land. Well, not the best people, the most loyal people. It also says here, one official said he had several colleagues from various agencies who had been told that even if they passed the initial vetting process to be admitted into the applicant pool, they would still need to prove their bona fides to convince interviewers of their enthusiasm to put in place Trump's policies, including by providing references from people whose loyalty had already been established. This official said one colleague who made it to the interview stage was asked what that person's moment of MAGA revelation had occurred. When that person's moment of MAGA revelation occurred. At the State Department, which has been a particular Trump target since his first term, current officials have described the atmosphere as tense and glum, with career civil and foreign service officers leery of voicing opinions on policy or personal matters, let alone politics, fearing retribution from their new political bosses. Two longtime department officials know there is always a period of uncertainty with any change of administration, but that the current transition to a group intent on making sweeping changes to the management and work of the department was unlike what they'd experienced in the past. And of course it goes on, and they defend it and say, we're also cleaning house, and so we started the process of terminating a lot of positions. It's time for a fresh start. It's time for a MAGA start. we will say that it's time for a MAGA start, for sure. Yeah, it's, yeah. Typically, historically, when regimes do this, you end up with government by the worst sort of people. It's not, it's kind of worse than kakistocracy because it's just, the level, it's never about competence or expertise or qualifications. It's about the loyalty to the leader. You see this in China already. A lot of China's management issues come from the fact that Xi Jinping has cleaned every person who's not loyal to him, not to the party, not to China, to him, out of the CCP. And that has led to a lot of China's issues, and also the fact that bad news never reaches him. So oftentimes Xi has no idea what's going on. You also see this in Argentina, you see it in Hungary. Historically, this is one of the problems the Soviet Union had. Was your loyalty to the party and to the state was far more important than actually knowing how to do your job, or being competent, or being able to manage things well, or run things, or anything like that. And it was the rot at the center of the Soviet Union that caused the whole system to fail. And now it's here, on our shores. But this is America. We'll do it differently, right? No. Hint, hint. Our next story, speaking of Republicans and elections, this is good. Kind of getting into some more post-election analysis. One of the interesting things that I came across was David Shore. He was responding to a Joshua Olson post that said, deep dive into actual data makes it clear Trump didn't win, Harris lost. The country isn't shifting to the right. The country's lost any faith in the Democratic Party, and with good reason. And he counters by saying the GOP holds edge in party affiliation for third straight year. Now, this used to not be true. If we look at this one here, if you look back even a little bit, 2016, Democrats, even here back in 2000, in the late aughts, the Democrats always had the majority of people, of voters, sort of thing. It was just a matter of getting them out or making sure they voted blue. Now we're to a situation where since 2021, Republicans have taken the lead in voter registration, and it's higher than it's ever been since the 90s. This basically means Republicans now have a structural way of staying in power. For the president, this includes the Electoral College, because people are moving to the Sun Belt, to red states. They're getting more electoral votes. Those electoral votes are leaving blue states. Ergo, they're going to have more electoral votes kind of structure already in place. That also means they'll end up with more House seats, which will already be in place there too. Now, that will sometimes help Democrats in the House and even in the Senate because of split ticket voting and the fact that a lot of the people moving from those northern states to southern states are Democrats themselves, and they tend to cluster in certain areas and all this type of thing, and so new congressional districts will have to accommodate them, and that will help. That also will probably get a couple Sun Belt states to flip, like possibly Georgia, maybe Texas at some point. all this sort of thing. But that means you've got multiple layers of electoral structures keeping the GOP in power, which means even if we have an election 2028, which again, I'm not convinced we're going to, um, then you basically have the GOP really being on top and shutting Democrats out of power for decades. Um, and the kind of the reply is he kind of gets into why this is a situation, and I think what's most interesting is and I don't know if we have the tweet in here. It was her appeal to her lack of ability to appeal to people who don't pay attention to politics. And I remember the poll that came out that was like, if you paid attention to politics and knew what was going on according to the facts, you tended to vote for Harris. If you didn't pay attention to politics and you didn't know the facts, you tended to vote for Trump. It's all vibes. And I think this is interesting that now basically what we're seeing is this big shift to the right in terms of, the Democrats have had their day, they've had their time, all this sort of thing, and now we've got this basically big shift to the right. And this could last for a while, especially given the popularity of right-wing policies among younger voters. This, really could be the, kind of the end of Democrats winning nationally, and certainly screws up the Senate for a long time. And I thought this was just an interesting thing to know and be aware of. Regardless of your political persuasion, it's an interesting structural thing to think about. And also to understand that although we've been in this political polarization, things are moving, things are changing, the ground is changing, and if the Democrats want to win, they're going to have to completely rethink everything and probably build back, bottom up on a completely different set of values and ideas and everything else. As I have said, post-election, I guarantee you all the pesky identity politics, culture war issues, all this type of thing are going to get dumped in favor of economic populism and stuff that's just more popular. But I think there's a certain segment of voters that will never come back to the Democratic Party. They're gone and they're not coming back. And there's also going to be an argument that says, look, Kamala did everything they could to appeal to median independent voters, to appeal to, moderate Republicans, conservative Democrats, all this type of thing, and look where it got them: nowhere. I covered a story last week about how people were mad about Gaza, and that affected the base of the Democratic Party far more than the Harris campaign realized. This debate's not going anywhere. But knowing that the GOP for the first time in decades has a structural party affiliation advantage in future elections is just something we all need to adjust our thinking to. Because literally the last time this was true, I was a child. So I've never worked in politics where the GOP's had the lead. Even when I worked in Republican politics, I've never worked in politics where this has been true. So for me, it's a big wake-up call and a big adjustment to my own thinking. And I think it's good for the readership as well. All right, where should we go next? Let's go to Colombia. So, this weekend, Trump and co. had a fun back and forth with Colombia about immigration deportations. If you're not aware, I'll catch you up. The mass deportations have started. It's gotten so bad that in many cases when it comes to factories and fields and places where immigrants are working, most of the workforce isn't even showing up. Pictures from the border in Mexico have shown mass people leaving the country. However, for those that have not self-deported by now, the ICE raids are happening. They're in hospitals, taking people away from hospitals. They're in schools, taking kids out of school, all this type of thing. Well, these people got to go somewhere. And for the ones from Colombia, they're packing them on planes and them out to Colombia. Well, Colombia refused the deportation flights. Trump threatened a 50% tariff, and Colombia agreed to accept deportation flights after Trump threatened the tariffs. It says here, under threats from President Trump that included steep tariffs. President Gustavo Petro of Colombia has relented and will allow U.S. military planes to fly deportees into the country after turning 2 transports back in response to what he called inhumane treatment. The 2 leaders had engaged in a war of words on Sunday after Colombia's move to block Mr. Trump's use of military aircraft in deporting thousands of unauthorized immigrants. But on Sunday night, the White House released a statement in which it said that because Mr. Petro had agreed to all of its terms, the tariffs and sanctions Mr. Trump had threatened would be held in reserve. Other penalties, such as visa sanctions, will remain in effect until the first plane load of deportees has arrived in Colombia. Today's events make clear to the world that America is respected again, it added. Colombia's foreign ministry released a statement soon afterward that said, "We have overcome the impasse with the United States government. It is said the government would accept all deportation flights and that guaranteed dignified conditions for those Colombians on board." Mr. Petro began the day by announcing that he had turned back U.S. military planes carrying deported immigrants. This set off a furious back and forth with Mr. Trump, who in turn announced a barrage of tariffs and sanctions targeting the country, which has long been a top U.S. ally in Latin America. Mr. Trump said on social media that the United States would immediately impose a 25% tariff on all Colombian imports and would raise them to 50% after a week. The Trump administration would also fully impose banking and financial sanctions on Colombia, apply a travel ban on Colombian government officials and their associates, and revoke their visas. Mr. Petro hit back on social media. In one post, he announced retaliatory tariffs of 25% on U.S. imports to Colombia, and in another longer post, he said those tariffs would hit 50%. Directly addressing Mr. Trump, Mr. Petro questioned whether the American president was trying to topple him. "You don't like our freedom? Fine," Mr. Petro said. "I do not shake hands with white enslavers." The clash reflected how Mr. Trump was ready to make an example out of Colombia as countries around the world grapple with how to prepare for the mass deportations of unauthorized immigrants that he has promised. "This looks like a pretty bold and daring escalation on both sides," said Will Freeman, a fellow for the Latin America Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, citing Colombia's economic reliance on the United States, which is still the South American country's largest trading partner, even as China has been making inroads. But equally, for Trump to threaten Colombia this way is pretty bold itself. That's because Colombia remains historically the longest-standing, the deepest strategic ally in the region. Mr. Trump signed an executive order last week authorizing the U.S. military to assist in securing the border, and the Department of Defense said it would use military aircraft to deport people held in U.S. custody along the southern border. And of course it goes on into the details and detritus of it all. Colombia is not among the countries with the largest unauthorized immigrant population in the United States, trailing far behind Mexico, El Salvador, India, Guatemala, and Honduras. In 2022, Mexicans remain the most common nationality among unauthorized immigrants in the United States, with about 4 million, while Colombia had about 190,000, according to the most recent data available from the Pew Research Center. So, will be interesting to see how this plays out with other smaller countries. It's obvious, that everyone else is probably going to fold pretty quick. It says here officials in Mexico, the source of the largest number of unauthorized immigrants in the United States, have said that they remained open to receiving deported citizens. Routine deportations have taken place to Mexican cities along the U.S. border in recent days. Still, Mexican authorities have not disclosed whether they plan to accept military flights or whether they will receive deported migrants from other countries, as Mexico sometimes has done in the past. On Friday, NBC reported that Mexico had refused to authorize a military plane carrying deportees from the U.S., an account that could not be independently confirmed. Honduras, which like Colombia has pushed back against the Trump administration's plans for mass deportations, has said that it has not yet explicitly been asked by U.S. officials that it's open to receiving military flights. So, in case you were wondering what that whole kerfluffle was about, that's what it's about. That's what's going on. There's going to be a lot more of this. A lot more of this as the mass deportations get underway. My only question is, who's going to work in the factories? Who's going to work in the fields when everyone is scared and already leaving, self-deporting, or getting gathered up? And that's already, it's already hitting construction, it's already hitting agriculture, it's already hitting factories, it's already here. I saw one video last night, someone was like, literally, there will be food shortages next week, the way things are going. So, this is round 1. US 1, Colombia 0. It's only going to get crazier from here on immigration. This is fun, and we're going to stop and have a bit of fun for a moment. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but this post was someone copied from Facebook to Twitter, and it said someone asked why so many British people do not like Donald Trump. And Nate White, an articulate and witty writer from England, wrote this response. A few things to come to mind. Trump lacks certain qualities which the British traditionally esteem. For instance, he has no class, no charm, no coolness, no credibility, no compassion, no wit, no warmth, no wisdom, no subtlety, no sensitivity, no self-awareness, no humility. No honor and no grace, all qualities, funnily enough, with which his predecessor, Mr. Obama, was generously blessed. So for us, the stark contrast does rather throw Trump's limitations into embarrassingly sharp relief. Plus, we like a laugh. And while Trump may be laughable, he has never once said anything wry, witty, or even faintly amusing. Not once, ever. I don't say that rhetorically, I mean it quite literally. Not once, not ever. And the fact that it is particularly disturbing to the British sensibility for us to lack humor is almost inhuman. But with Trump, it's a fact. He doesn't even seem to understand what a joke is. His idea of a joke is a crass comment, an illiterate insult, a casual act of cruelty. Trump is a troll, and like all trolls, he's never funny and he never laughs. He only crows or jeers. And scarily, he doesn't just talk in crude, witless insults. He actually thinks in them. His mind is a simple bot-like algorithm of petty prejudices and knee-jerk nastiness. There's never any underlayer of irony, complexity, nuance, or depth. It's all surface. Some Americans might see this as refreshingly upfront. Well, we don't. We see it as having no inner world, no soul. And in Britain, we traditionally side with David, not Goliath. All our heroes are plucky underdogs. Robin Hood, Dick Whittington, Oliver Twist. Trump is neither plucky nor an underdog. He's the exact opposite of that. He's not even a spoiled rich boy or a greedy fat cat. He's more of a white fat slug, a Jabba the Hutt of privilege. And worse, he's that most unforgivable of all things to the British, a bully. That is, except when he is among bullies, then he suddenly transforms into a sniveling sidekick instead. There are unspoken rules to this stuff. The Queensberry rules of basic decency, and he breaks them all. He punches downwards, which a gentleman could never do, and with every blow every blow he aims is below the belt. He particularly likes to kick the vulnerable or the voiceless, and he kicks them when they're down. So the fact that a significant minority, perhaps a third of Americans, look at what he does, listen to what he says, and then think, yeah, he seems like my kind of guy, is a matter of some confusion and a little distress to the British people, given that Americans are supposed to be nicer than us and mostly are. You don't need a particularly keen eye for detail to spot a few flaws in the man. This last point is what particularly confuses and dismays British people, and other people too. His faults seem pretty bloody hard to miss. After all, it's impossible to read a single tweet or hear him speak a single sentence or two without staring deep into the abyss. He turns being artless into an art form. He is a Picasso of pettiness, a Shakespeare of shit. His faults are fractal, even his flaws have flaws, and so on, ad infinitum. I don't have any commentary for that. That just brought me joy, and in these dark days, we need some joy. Let's move on. Not yet. I want to talk about... Oh, this is a short story. I'm not going to get super deep into it, but there's a situation happening in South Africa. Let me catch you up. So, South Africa recently passed a law similar to Zimbabwe about land reapportionment from wealthy white farmers who own lots and lots of land to black people. This happened in Zimbabwe. It caused a famine. It was kind of a disaster. It's been repealed in recent years. In South Africa, there has been, since the end of apartheid in the 90s, there's been a lot of back and forth and struggle with how to adjust the economy and the wealth disparity between the white minority and the black majority. And so this is another attempt at this sort of thing. And this is kind of the latest sort of story here. And in this story, they're talking about how who has the land now, who's going to redistribute it, and kind of what is fertile and what's not. And so it says here, if you look at the Eastern Cape here, over here, of Transkei and KwaZulu-Natal in the eastern coast, the best, most fertile, high rainfall agricultural parts of South Africa, owned by black tribes. After all the years and 30 years under ANC governance, that's African Nationalist, ANC, I forget what it stands for, African Nationalist something. Not party, something else. They contribute almost nothing to commercial farming in South Africa. In fact, the children are dying of hunger. Ask head economist of agriculture and look at statistical data about production and land ownership. Then, to add to the millions of hectares tribal land since 1984, the ANC has also distributed the following: restitution 6.668 million hectares, government land redistribution 7.55 million hectares, private transactions 1.9 million hectares, proactive land acquisition strategy program 2.54 million hectares, and government acquisition for non-agricultural use 0.63 million hectares. This gives a total of 19.3 million hectares, or 24.9% of the total of all freehold farmland in South Africa, excluding the millions of hectares of tribal lands. The correct way to award the statement on the progress with land reform since 1994 is therefore as follows. Almost 25% of all farmland previously owned by white landowners have been redistributed to the black South Africans or are now under state ownership. Shocking data show that 90% of the land that was redistributed to South Africa's black population from white farmers are not productive, the government has said. Some of the best land is and has always been owned by black people. White farmers developed some areas where no black tribes ever farmed or lived into top commercial units. This land issue is driven by jealousy and hate. I'm not going to dig into the complications of South African politics. I don't quite know enough about it to speak on it knowledgeably, and when I don't, I keep my mouth shut. But the reason we're going to pay attention to this story is because this has already kind of broken out of containment and has gotten into some of the more racist parts of Twitter. Look for this story to come up. Especially if you're on social media, you're gonna see this South Africa land redistribution thing come up, where they're doing to these South African farmers what happened in Zimbabwe, sort of thing, which is true. That's not a lie. That is what they're doing. Look for this story to come up. Be aware of this story coming up. I think the worst thing is this could potentially lead to a certain amount of collapse in South Africa, in a country that's already struggling financially, that's already struggling with hunger and famine and all this sort of thing. There's even already people that are kind of like, oh yeah, we should have we should just, import them to America, all this everything. Remember, one of our chief people in charge, who has no official role, Elon Musk, is from South Africa. Now, the one story I want to cover from last week that we didn't get to was the retail theft situation. And this was interesting because, as you know, over the last couple years, especially during the pandemic, one of the big stories has been the rise in shoplifting and retail theft. And Walgreens came out recently, we covered it on the show, and said, oh, we're having sales losses because we locked up certain things that were getting stolen all the time, but people don't like that. We're going to have to undo that and just take the loss and all this sort of thing. And as it turns out, and I found this from justjournalism.org, this was sent around to a lot of people. That's not quite what happened. It's kind of funny because there is this story where it's kind of coming out that the companies involved were really just price gouging and locking stuff up unnecessarily. So this story came out in 2023 from CNBC. And it says, retailers have zeroed in on organized retail theft as a top priority as more and more companies blame crime for lower profits. But it's difficult for companies to tally just how much stolen goods affect their bottom lines, and even tougher to confirm their claims. More than a dozen retailers, including Target, Dollar General, Foot Locker, Ulta, called out shrink, or more specifically retail theft, as a reason they cut their profit outlook or reported lower margins when they released earnings in May and June. Those mentions could flare up again as a flurry of retail companies will report financial results starting next week. Many of them described organized theft as an industry-wide problem that's largely out of their control. Some retailers lumped it in with heavy discounting, soft sales, and macroeconomic conditions as other factors that cut into their margins. While organized theft is a real concern, it's nearly impossible to verify the claims retailers make about it. Keep that in mind. Now, over here on CNN, stores say shoplifting is a national crisis. The numbers don't back it up. And this is also from 2023. And it talks about, it gets into, here it is. In fact, the average shrink rate as a percentage of sales dropped from 1.4% in 2020 in 2021 from 1.6% in 2020, according to the latest survey. That number has hovered around 1.4% for more than a decade. Retailers on average saw a 26.5% increase in organized retail crime incidents nationally in 2021 from the prior year, according to the survey. Organized retail crime typically refers to large-scale retail theft and fraud by groups of professional shoplifters who conspire to steal and then resell stolen merchandise. Companies and law enforcement experts say the growth of online shopping has allowed criminals to quickly find ways to sell stolen merchandise on online marketplaces like Amazon. Retailers have pushed legislation during the pandemic that would crack down on websites reselling stolen goods. And as it turns out, it wasn't quite as crazy as they thought it was. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is retail theft is not an independent category in most crime data published by police departments. Instead, retail theft are included in broader crime categories, including robbery, burglary, and larceny. To get the most accurate sense of retail theft trends relative to home burglaries, thefts from cars, and other types of property crime, breaks these offenses down by location as necessary. It also says that changes to corporate policies regarding shoplifting may have large impacts on the crime rates published by police departments. For example, the larceny rate in San Francisco jumped substantially 1 month because a single Target store changed the way it reported shoplifting. It is something where the hype about the problem may have been much bigger than the actual problem involved. And I think the interesting thing about all of this, and they get into policy changes and all this sort of thing, is that the I think it's a classic case of the hype of it all became way more than the actual problem in place. Oh, we have a comment. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that shoplifting is not a problem. Let me story time. So, when I lived in Seattle, which I did from 2020 to 2023, shoplifting was a huge problem. I used to go to this Walgreens in just outside of my district, in my neighborhood. I lived in International, and I would go to this Walgreens in Hilltop that was 4 or 5 blocks from my house. Or my apartment, rather. Very small apartment. And I saw people walk right out the store with stuff. I'm not saying that it's not a problem. It definitely is, and I think we've all seen instances like, mentioned. Yeah, sure, shot to death yesterday in the Walgreens and a shoplifter. Like, yes, and I've seen shops that didn't have security start to have security. I've seen more bag checks. We've seen, even at Walmarts, people checking bags. Also, gates in the front of Walmarts, I've seen those. Even, in Wilmington, in the nice areas of town. I'm not saying it's not a problem. The reason why I'm covering this is that it was maybe not quite as big of a problem, or most importantly, quite as big of a story as some people wanted it to be. That's all I'm saying, is that it was maybe a little bit overblown, and it wasn't quite as bad as people said it, kind of said it was. And also, as compared to other types of property crime, it's relatively small. Now, let me go on to say, that's still not a good thing, okay? That's still not, we don't want to live in a society where you can't open a shop and not have your merchandise be safe. I say that as someone who's owned a local business. I've owned a shop. Every day, open 11 to 7. I've done the retail life. I worked at Target when I was in late high school, early college. I've done the retail life. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that in society, on social media, and especially in politics, we get narratives going. And one of the problems with the retail theft narrative is that it made the problem seem like there wasn't a store safe in the entire country. And, they were all out to get you, sort of thing. And it added to this narrative that we were living in a low trust, high crime, terrible society that was absolutely dangerous to live in. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because it was not as bad as was proposed. Now, was it good? No. Do we definitely need to have the cops enforcing stuff a lot more? Absolutely. Should we have unarmed security getting shot by criminals and ne'er-do-wells? Absolutely not. None of these things are good. And anyone who says they're good is dumb. But I also do believe that this narrative, this high crime, high shoplifting narrative, got a hold of on social media and created an unfair narrative that somehow no retailer in this country was safe. And the big retailers were kind of like, oh, yes, we have terrible theft problems. And as it turns out, not necessarily. And it's fully defined. And we don't really have data for that. That's the point, is that these narratives get started. And they have real consequences. But when they're not backed up by data, you can end up hurting people. People end up making political decisions, in this case voting, on narratives that have no actual basis in fact. So all I'm out here saying is that, yeah, that was the vibe, and yeah, we probably have little bit of a problem, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be more fierce on prosecuting crime. We definitely need to do more of that, but it wasn't quite the disaster that we thought it was. And that has interesting implications for how we handle the stuff moving forward, what the vibes are moving forward, and how much we should trust these retailers when they come and say they have a problem. It's a big problem. The story I'm not going to cover this week is about the YouTubers and the election. We'll save that for next week because we covered a lot. We did so much. I appreciate y'all. My name is Cameron Lee Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal. If you want to keep up with me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's at Cameron Cowan. If you want to catch me on Blue Sky at Cameron Journal, same thing over at TikTok. If you don't want to figure out all those links, not a problem. Head over to CameronJournal.com. They're right at the top. Make sure to look out for fresh videos, fresh interviews. The interview today, what was the interview today, actually? The interview today was Benjamin Bressington. No, is it Benjamin Bressington? No, that's next week. The interview today was, Sid Mohaseb. And it was a business interview. It's a really great one. I kind of talk about it as a business thing, but it's really about a mindset thing. So go check out Sid Mohaseb. That's the interview this week. I'll catch you all online, and I will not see you next week, actually. I will not be here next week. I'm going on a little trip on the 3rd of February, so I'll not be here next week. So I will see you in 2 weeks, and we'll get into it again and go from there. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.